So I was 19 years of age when I met a young cancer patient called Tara. Tara was a chance meeting. I was matched to be her volunteer companion at a camp quality camp. And that is actually a picture of Tara and myself. I'm slightly rounder cheeked and trying to pretend I'm not a ginger by dyeing my hair brown. So Tara is absolutely a ray of sunshine. And what was really interesting about my chance meeting is that I wasn't aware that this was going to literally change the trajectory of my life. When I was 19 years of age, it was my first camp quality camp. And if you've never been on one, which probably many of you haven't, it's pretty nerve-wracking the first 10 minutes. There are people in bright coloured t-shirts, kids and adults hugging, kissing, carrying on, really excited about the week that's ahead. And as a new person who knows absolutely no one, who is completely terrified as a 19-year-old, anxious about the week ahead, thinking that potentially I've just joined a cult, I was really super anxious. And what was really interesting in that moment was Tara kind of bounded in and kind of saved me from this rumination of worry and uncertainty about the week ahead. You see, Tara has this kind of beautiful, calming, joyous energy. And she's the type of person when you walk into a room, you just feel deeply connected in that moment. And when she bounded up to me and said hello and introduced herself again, we'd met just once before, I immediately relaxed. I calmed down, my nervous system chilled, and there was just no one else in this room or in this bus stop than Tara and myself. And this chance meeting with Tara is the reason I'm standing in front of you today. Her sense of joy and positive emotion created this deep desire in me to learn about how I too might be able to bring this joy and energy to people around me. So I started researching fields like positive psychology and neuroscience and emotional intelligence to learn some of the psychology of what I deeply felt in this interaction with Tara. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about positive emotions and the ripple effect of what we can create by the way we show up to the adversity we face. So whether you're diagnosed with cancer, or you're having a change process at work that's really intense, or a difficult interaction with someone at work, the way we show up as practitioners and humans has a ripple effect to those around us. And we know this through the science. There's a really interesting, famous study called Framing Heart Study. And what they found is our emotions are contagious, just like Tara's emotional state was contagious to me, to 3 degrees of separation, meaning that my emotional state here today will have a direct impact on all of you in this room. That's 1 degree. It'll have an impact on your connections. That's 2 degrees. And your connections. And I am pretty sure I've not met 99% of you in this room. And my emotional state today, the way I show up when I'm bloody nervous speaking in front of 250 people, does have an impact. And it might sound really easy, but it is hard. It is hard to create that positive ripple effect. And that's because we live in a VUCA world. And I'm sure many of you have heard of this term before, but if you haven't, it was really popularised by the US Army a number of years ago to represent our highly volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world. And I can tell you what, hasn't the last 12 months felt VUCA? I can honestly tell you I work in the wellbeing industry and I've really struggled. It's been intense. When you're running webinars virtually back to back, when your team aren't able to connect, when you're in Melbourne and you're locked down for 6 months, right? This uncertainty in us, this ambiguity and this change does actually create a fear state in us because our brains like certainty. We know we like to be able to predict things. We know that we like to be in control. And when we have a lot of uncertainty, when we're going through change and transformation in our organisations, just be mindful that if you see or feel resistance from employees, it's maybe because they're scared. They're not sure about what's going to happen in their future. And so this VUCA world does have a negative impact on us if we're not aware of it. And the reason it creates a threat state is because of our biological programming. So back when we needed to protect ourselves from saber-toothed tigers, we needed to know immediately whether that rustling in the trees was literally a saber-toothed tiger, or whether it was just the wind kind of just brushing beautifully through the trees. And what happened is our brains so smartly said, I know right now I need to protect this human, and so I'm going to subconsciously scan this environment all the time. And I'm going to look for danger as quick as I possibly can, because the quicker I can see danger, the quicker I can protect myself. And this is a really essential biological mechanism in us, because it means that we're surviving. We're a survival creature, right? Like we've lived for, hopefully we're going to live for 80 or plus years. So this biological mechanism is great for survival, but not so great for our psychological well-being. And the reason being is this part of the brain that kind of is hyper-vigilant isn't so great at deciphering the difference between real life danger and perceived danger. So that perceived danger might be transformation at work, or might be speaking in front of 250 strangers, or might be a tight deadline at work. And so we're instigating a threat response, a flight or fight response. And so many of us are in this stress response for way too much of our day, and we're not able to recover. And so this is actually, there's a biological term called the negativity bias. And so this brain of ours is constantly scanning for perceived dangers. And so we are actually viewing the world in a more negative lens than what it potentially could be. When we think about how we're changing our organisations, are you aware that potentially your staff are being overly negative in the way they're interacting with you? And also, are you being overly negative to the way that they're responding to change? So that might sound all a bit doom and gloom, so let's do something fun. So in a moment, I'm going to invite you to, on your tables, introduce yourself to someone you don't know. If you know everyone on your table, maybe find someone kind of nearby. I'm going to invite you to have a conversation for 1 minute each about your proudest career moment to date. Oh, swap person, halfway. Closing out your conversations when you're ready. Holy heck, I think you like each other. You might not have noticed I said closing out your conversations when you're ready probably 6 or 7 times. And what's really interesting about this activity, and the reason I wanted to do it, is because we know the power of human connection. And in fact, I'm looking at you all right now, and I've got way more eye contact. Immediately, like almost everyone is giving me eye contact. You're sitting up straighter, you're more engaged. Versus before, there was, a little bit of disengagement. It's a 2-day conference, that's okay. It's hard yakka to be present for 2 whole days. And so potentially what might have happened here is that maybe you feel a little more connected to that person or people you were talking to. Maybe you feel like there's a little more fuel in your tank. Maybe you feel a little bit more alert. And maybe you feel like potentially your brain is a little bit clearer. So what we know from the research of positive psychology is that when we experience positive emotions, there's a broadening and building effect. We literally become more expansive when we experience positive emotions. And this is the research of a lady called Barbara Fredrickson. She's I'm a fangirl. She's one of my top 5 researchers. And what she found is that these broadening and building effects happen in 4 key areas. So when we experience positive emotions, there's a broadening and building of our social resources. We connect better. We collaborate better. We want to be around people when we're experiencing them. We also know there's an improvement in our physical resources. We feel more energized when we experience positive emotions. Potentially why many of you are sitting up a little bit straighter, and I reckon you're probably feeling a little bit more engaged. In fact, I feel a little bit more alert, and I just got to feel that beautiful energy. I wasn't even talking about my proudest moment. The last two there is our intellectual resources. When we experience positive emotions, it literally has a biological response in us, meaning that we actually have a chemical reaction. One of those chemicals we release is dopamine. And dopamine is so powerful in building our intellectual resources. It can fuel our prefrontal cortex, which is our executive part of the brain, the bit that most of us kind of want to work from for most part of our day. And we also know, lastly, that our psychological resources are also improved. This is our resilience. And I know resilience has kind of been thrown around the last day or so. When we experience positive emotions, there's this like banking up effect. We can kind of deposit them more and hold on to them to enable us to navigate change and uncertainty and ambiguity a little bit easier. So when you're thinking about your day, your systems, your approach, can you try to bring more positive emotions in to help your staff be open, resilient, definitely more open to the changes you're trying to make? So I want to just quickly mention here that I'm not just talking about happiness. I think we can kind of just get a little bit fixated that the only positive emotion you can experience is happiness. There are lots of positive emotions we can experience. I've got 10 up on the slide, but some of my favourite are joy, curiosity, and we've heard curiosity thrown a lot around in the last day or so, gratitude, compassion, kindness. And when we think about the way we approach HR, are there ways we can build more of these practices in? So everything we do at Oranges is about providing practical tools. So today I wanted to provide you with 5 positive emotions that you might like to try a little bit more of building in your organisations when you leave here today. And I want to talk to you about 2 different approaches. We've got the systems approach, which you all are really familiar in, and then we've got our inner resources. The things that you can call upon internally within yourself and also in your teams. And so the first positive emotion here is pride. And there was a reason I asked you to share your proudest career moment. And I could see in the room you were smiling, you were engaged, and there's so many ways we can bring more pride into our businesses. We know, I actually don't know any organisation that doesn't have a recognition program. The interesting thing is, every single one of our clients, their recognition program is underutilised. So our job in HR is to not just have a system and be okay with it, but find ways. What are the barriers of that participation? Why are our teams not doing peer recognition? And when you can use data and when you can have anecdotal feedback, you can actually start to learn why there's that barrier and you can share more of it. In terms of your own inner resources, when was the last time you celebrated the success of a peer? Try to do this every week. One of the best things I have when I think about habits is I put a calendar reminder in my diary to do something. So every Friday morning I have a little pop-up that says celebrate or say something grateful to 2 people, literally every Friday morning. So I don't have to think about it. It pops up, I'm like, okay, all right, I've got to think about something nice. It actually kind of helps me get out of this rumination that I can find myself in. So that's pride. I next want to share with you hope. And hope is really quite closely associated with optimism. And the system approach here that I've added is actually one from Motorola Solutions, one of our clients. And Melissa's here in the room somewhere. So after one of our workshops, they actually decided that as an organisation, they wanted to put in place an optimism award. They knew that developing the thinking, the mindset of being more optimistic was going to help their tech-based organisation create open mindsets to innovate and for their teams to perform at their best. In terms of your own inner resources, just be mindful of your language. Not just language you speak, but language you tell yourself. Because our language becomes our behaviour, and our behaviour impacts our world. And so language could be things like, I have to go to the gym, right? You feel like you have to go versus I want to go to the gym. It's nuanced, but it's different. It's more engaging, it's more hopeful, it's more of a towards state versus an away state. The next emotion here is joy. There's a reason I put a little kid on here, right? They just seem to be able to bring the joy out in us. Many of you have probably got social clubs in your organisations. Again, they also seem to be underutilised. So can you freshen it up? Can you get to know your people a little bit more? Because this is more important than ever. And then we have our inner resources. We all know that there's Choir Fridays now, right? From yesterday's presentation. So just do something fun in your meetings the next time that you're with your people. Gratitude for me is the absolute underutilised positive emotion in our businesses today. It could be as simple as putting a gratitude board up in your offices like Camp Quality does in every office. It could be the fact that in your own inner resources that you actually just express gratitude regularly, or you have a gratitude journal. And then last but not least, interest. This one's in here on purpose. When we think about positive emotions, we think about them being open and kind of high energy, but interest is really closely associated with curiosity, and we've talked about that in the last day or so. And when we can instill curiosity and interest and growth mindsets, we know our teams perform better. They're more innovative, they're more creative. And there's a reason why Microsoft have trained all of the people in growth mindsets now. They know this is an important thinking tool for them to overcome challenges and adversity. And then in terms of your own inner resources, 2 ears, 1 mouth. Ask questions. Not to respond, ask questions to learn. As HR practitioners, we should be speaking less than we are hearing. And I wanted to mention this very quickly. I am absolutely, unequivocally not saying toxic positivity. When someone comes to you, when they're having a challenging time, try not to fix it straight away. Try not to say, well, what is the silver lining here? And yes, it's a really well-intended statement, but sometimes we're not validating people's experience. When someone is having a challenging time, the best thing to do is say, I'm sorry and I hear you. Give them space, be present, and allow for space for negative emotions, just like positive emotions. And so you're probably wondering whatever happened to young Tara. Well, this is a picture of her and myself at a 21st Bollywood-themed party, and she still is the ripple effect. Every time she enters a room, she creates joy, connection, vibrancy, calmness, and just awesome humanness. And I guess I want to finish by saying, as HR practitioners, as parents, as people, what ripple effect